I thought the strange car outside my house was just coincidence, until I watched my security camera and saw someone moving inside my bedroom, not outside, not near my door, inside my house. That's when I realized I wasn't being watched anymore. I was being hunted. This happened only a few months ago, from the time I'm writing this. I work overnight shifts at a warehouse, so my schedule is flipped compared to most people. I usually sleep during the day and stay awake between around 6 p.m. and 9 or 10 a.m., even on my days off. I like keeping my body on the same rhythm. That night, my shift ended at about 4 a.m. The drive home was quiet. The roads were completely empty, and the city felt half asleep. When I turned onto my street and slowed near my house, something immediately caught my attention. There was a car parked right beside my driveway. I eased off the gas as I passed it, trying to get a better look. It was an old black sedan with heavily tinted windows. I couldn't see through any of the glass. All the lights were off. No movement, no sign anyone was inside. I pulled into my garage and parked, glancing down the driveway one more time before heading inside. The way my neighborhood is laid out, there's usually plenty of open parking space along the road. You can normally park right in front of whichever house you're visiting. Parking directly beside my driveway felt unnecessary when there were so many empty spots nearby. At first, I assumed someone was visiting one of my neighbors. Maybe they had people over and all the closer spaces were taken earlier. I checked the windows again about an hour later, and the car was gone. The rest of the day passed normally. I slept until around 6 p.m., got ready for another night at work, and when I pulled out of the driveway, the car wasn't there. I didn't think about it anymore. My next shift was exhausting, but I was looking forward to having the following night off. When I finally drove home again in the early morning hours, the roads were empty just like before. But when I reached my house, my stomach tightened. The same black sedan was parked in the exact same spot. I slowed down as I passed it, trying again to see inside the windows. Still nothing. No silhouettes, no movement, just dark glass reflecting the streetlights. After parking in the garage, I walked down the driveway to get a closer look. As I approached, I thought I saw something shift inside the car. Just a flicker of movement behind the tinted window. It was so quick that I couldn't be sure if it was real or just a reflection. I stopped about 10 feet away. I didn't feel comfortable getting any closer if someone really was inside. I couldn't see anything else. Before going back inside, I decided to take a photo of the license plate, just in case this turned into a recurring problem. I figured I'd probably never need it, but it made me feel a little safer. Later that morning, I checked again. The car was gone. Strange, but it wasn't directly harming me, so I didn't know what else to do about it. I made dinner, watched TV for a few hours, then went to sleep until early evening. By the time I woke up, the sun had already set. Since I had the night off, I went for my usual long walk around the neighborhood. When I left the house, the car wasn't there. But when I came back about an hour later, my heart dropped. The car was back. Same spot, same angle, same dark windows. I had just walked the entire neighborhood and barely saw any other cars parked on the street. Why was this one always here, and only at night? This time, I walked right up to it. I pressed my hand against the window to block out reflections and tried to see inside. The car was empty. No people, no belongings. Nothing that explained why it kept showing up in front of my house. It was one of those situations that felt deeply wrong, but didn't give me a clear reason to call anyone or report it. Nothing illegal was technically happening, just something unsettling. I went back inside. The first thing I did was grab my phone, which I'd left charging on my nightstand while I was out walking. As soon as I picked it up, I noticed a notification. Motion detected. It was from my security camera system. I had a camera on my front porch that only faced the door, and 3 cameras inside the house covering the main rooms. The alert didn't specify which camera triggered it, so I opened the app. A 60-second clip was saved. I watched the footage. For most of the video, the house was completely still and silent. Nothing moved. I almost assumed it was a glitch. Then, in the last few seconds, something crossed the very bottom of the frame. It happened fast, only a fraction of a second. Just part of a head and shoulders sliding through view. My hands went numb. The footage was from the bedroom I was standing in. The house suddenly felt unbearably quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I slowly turned around, scanning every corner of the room. They could still be here, watching me. The panic hit all at once. I knew I had to leave immediately. I rushed toward the doorway, and the moment I stepped into the hall, I heard movement behind me. Footsteps, fast, close, maybe 15 feet back. I sprinted for the front door and burst outside, running straight into the trees without even looking back. I didn't care who it was or what they wanted. I just needed distance. Eventually, the only sound left was my own breathing and the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. I called 911. When police arrived, the car was gone, but I still had the photo of the license plate. It took them about 3 hours to track the vehicle down and arrest the driver. It was a man in his mid-20s. He looked completely unstable. On his phone, police found multiple photos of my house, some taken at night through my windows while I was inside. He also had notes documenting exactly when I left and returned from work over the past 2 weeks. He had been stalking me. To this day, no one knows how he managed to get inside my house without triggering the cameras, or how many times he had done it before this. The only reason he was caught was because he accidentally crossed into the frame of one camera for less than a second. If that camera hadn't captured him, I might never have known he was already inside my home. Next story. I thought the storm was the most dangerous thing on the road that night. Empty highways, zero traffic, no lights for miles. Then my phone buzzed with a pickup request in the middle of nowhere. And 15 minutes later, a soaked stranger silently slipped into my back seat, even though I never saw him approach. By the time I realized something was very wrong, it was already too late to turn back. This happened about 4 years ago, but I still catch myself thinking about it every now and then. At the time, I was working as an Uber driver. On stormy nights like that one, business usually slowed to a crawl. Sometimes I wouldn't get a single request all night. Still, I always stayed out, either driving around listening to music or sitting in an empty parking lot scrolling through YouTube on my phone. Even 1 or 2 rides made the night worth it. That night was exactly what I expected. Heavy rain, loud thunder, practically no cars on the road. For the first hour, I stayed parked in a lot, watching the rain slam against my windshield and listening to the town go quiet. Eventually, I drove out to grab some food, then came back and waited again. That's when my phone finally buzzed with a ride request. I opened the app and immediately frowned. The pickup location was about 25 minutes away from me, and the drop-off was another 20 minutes beyond that. Usually when that happened, it meant no other drivers were working and I was the closest available one. Even if closest still meant far away. I didn't have anything better to do, so I accepted it. The drive felt strangely long. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was how empty the roads were. But the whole thing felt unreal, like I was drifting through a place I wasn't meant to be. At times, I almost forgot I was even heading to pick someone up. The road kept pulling me deeper into areas I'd never driven before, surrounded by nothing but dark fields and thick tree lines. After about 35 minutes, my GPS announced I'd arrived. I slowed down and looked around. There was nothing there. No houses, no lights, just 2 intersecting roads in the middle of nowhere, with forest pressing in on both sides. Rain hammered down so hard it blurred everything beyond my headlights. I confirmed in the app that I'd reached the pin location and sat there, scanning the darkness, wondering who in their right mind would request an Uber from a place like this during a storm. I glanced down to message the rider when movement flashed in my side mirror. Before I could fully process it, the back door opened, and someone climbed into my car. I jumped. I hadn't seen anyone walking toward me. No silhouette on the road, No movement near the trees. He seemed to appear out of nowhere. The man was soaked head to toe, water dripping off his jacket and hair. His expression was tense, almost angry, and his eyes felt wrong somehow. Unfocused, heavy. I forced myself to stay calm. "You ordered the Uber?" I asked. He answered by saying my first name. That alone sent a chill through me. It confirmed he was the correct passenger, but hearing my name spoken by a stranger in the middle of a stormy nowhere felt unsettling. I started driving. A few minutes passed in silence, and the tension only grew. He wasn't sitting behind one of the seats like most passengers. He was positioned directly in the middle of the back seat, perfectly centered in my rear-view mirror every time I glanced up. It felt like he was watching me constantly. Something about him felt off, wrong, like a quiet pressure in the air. As the road stretched farther into emptiness, I finally worked up the nerve to speak. "So, what brings you out here tonight?" I asked, keeping my tone light, especially with a storm like this. I met his eyes in the mirror. He looked away instantly. For a moment, it seemed like he was about to answer. His mouth shifted slightly, but then he said nothing. He completely ignored the question. The silence that followed felt heavy, uncomfortable. I could feel my instincts tightening, warning me something wasn't right. He started shifting slightly in his seat, glancing around, then checking my reflection again. Rain blurred my windshield, forcing me to focus hard on the road, and not being able to fully see what he was doing behind me made my nerves spike. Then he spoke. "Drop me off here." His voice was sharp and commanding. I glanced at the GPS. We were still in the middle of nowhere. No buildings, no streetlights, nothing. "Are you sure?" I started to ask. He cut me off immediately. "Drop me off here." Something in his tone erased any hesitation I had. I pulled over to the side of the road. As he reached for the door handle, I noticed his eyes flick down toward my phone on the center console. The Uber app was still open, showing the active ride. He froze for a second. His hand lingered on the door. Then he glanced back at my phone again, and pulled his own phone out, quickly checking something on the screen. In that moment, I understood exactly what had just clicked in his mind. The app had his name, his information, a record of the ride. Whatever he had been thinking of doing suddenly wasn't anonymous anymore. I decided to lean into that realization. "Hey, don't worry," I said quickly. "I'll cancel the ride from my end so you won't be charged." I hoped that would reinforce the idea that his identity was already logged, and maybe scare him away from whatever he had planned. He stared at me with cold, angry eyes for several long seconds. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the storm. Within seconds, the rain and fog swallowed him completely. I didn't hesitate. I pulled back onto the road and drove away fast. Even though I had no concrete proof that he intended to hurt anyone, my gut told me something had been seriously wrong. I reported the incident to the police anyway, giving them all the details I could remember. Several days later, I received a call that made my blood run cold. Someone had gone missing that same night, last seen near the wooded area not far from where I had picked the man up. The storm had washed away most potential evidence before any serious search could begin. They never found the missing person. They never found the man I drove that night. I was the last known person to have seen him. And sometimes, when I think about how close I came to staying on that road just a little longer, I realize how lucky I was to make it home at all. Next story. I thought the muddy tire tracks in my driveway were nothing. I thought the strange knock was just the rain. I thought the dirt on my floor came from my own shoes. But when the TV suddenly turned itself on upstairs, I realized someone had been inside my house the entire evening, watching me. This happened on what I thought was going to be a completely normal weekday. Instead, it turned into one of the most disturbing nights of my life. It was early April, and it had been raining nonstop all day. My job was partly indoors and partly outdoors, which made rainy days absolutely exhausting. By the time my shift ended around 6 in the evening, I was drained, cold, and ready to get home. My house sits in a rural part of town, surrounded by trees and long stretches of quiet road. The drive home took about 30 minutes through heavy rain and low visibility. As I turned into my muddy driveway, something immediately caught my attention. There were tire tracks already there, fresh ones. The driveway was basically soaked mud at this point, and the tracks looked recent, like another vehicle had driven all the way up to my house not long before I arrived. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was the mail truck. Maybe a delivery driver made a wrong turn. But when I reached the front door, there was no mail, no package, nothing. Looking back at the tracks more closely, it seemed like whoever had driven up had done a 3-point turn near the house and left. Probably just someone who accidentally pulled into the wrong driveway. Still, something about it lingered in my mind. I went inside, changed out of my soaked clothes, and headed to the kitchen to make a quick dinner. Around 7:30, I thought I heard a knock near the front door. Just one knock. Quiet. Almost swallowed by the rain and wind outside. I wasn't even sure I actually heard it. Curious, I walked across the house and opened the front door. Rain immediately blasted into my face, wind pushing against the doorway. But no one was there. The porch was completely empty. I closed the door and told myself it was probably just the weather playing tricks on my ears. For the next hour or so, nothing happened. I relaxed on the couch, watching a show and scrolling on my phone. Eventually, I got up to use the bathroom. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a small smear of dirt on the white tile floor, right behind the couch. It stood out instantly. I never walked through the house with muddy shoes, especially not on white tile, and the spot was positioned in a place I definitely would have noticed earlier when I was sitting on the couch. I wiped it up with a rag, but a strange unease settled in my stomach. I tried convincing myself it was meaningless, just one of those weird little things that happen sometimes. Still, the thought crept in. What if it wasn't me? I returned to the couch, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling like something was behind me. That subtle, crawling sensation of being watched. The entire bottom floor of the house stretched out behind the couch, hidden from my view, and suddenly it felt wrong to sit there. Eventually, the discomfort got so strong that I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my bedroom. At least up there, my bed was against a wall. Nothing could be behind me. I turned on the small TV in my room and tried to relax. About 20 minutes later, just as my nerves started settling, I heard a muted sound outside my bedroom door. A dull thump, maybe a footstep, maybe something brushing against the wall. My stomach tightened instantly. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the door, listening. Silence. After a moment of hesitation, I opened the door and peered into the hallway. It was empty, quiet, still. The only other room upstairs was a spare room I used as a small library and office. I took a step toward it, and suddenly the TV downstairs turned on at full volume. The sound exploded through the house. My heart slammed in my chest as adrenaline flooded my body. I sprinted down the hallway and rushed downstairs. The entire first floor was dark except for the flashing glow of the TV lighting up the walls. I entered the living room carefully. No one was there. I approached the TV slowly, scanning every corner and turned it off manually. My hands were shaking. Now everything added up. The tire tracks, the knock, the dirt on the floor, the noise outside my door, the TV turning on by itself. I grabbed a kitchen knife and began clearing the house, room by room. Looking back, I should have called the police immediately. But in that moment, I convinced myself I could at least confirm whether someone was still inside. The entire first floor appeared empty. Slowly, I moved back upstairs. My nerves were stretched thin, but part of me still tried to rationalize everything as coincidence. Until I reached the spare room. The door creaked open. Inside, everything looked normal, except for one thing lying on the floor near the closet, the TV remote. the remote for the downstairs television. My blood ran cold. I backed away instantly, rushed downstairs, and ran straight out of the house while calling the police. When officers arrived, they found additional signs of entry, including a broken lock on one of the downstairs windows. Most likely, whoever it was had driven down my driveway earlier while I was still at work. They probably knocked to see if anyone was home. When no one answered, they left, only to come back later and break in. They had been inside my house the entire evening, watching me, listening, waiting. When I went upstairs, they must have grabbed the remote and turned on the TV to distract me while I approached the room they were hiding in, giving them time to escape unnoticed. Nothing was stolen, no clear motive, just the chilling realization that someone had been inside my home while I was completely unaware. Even now, thinking about it still sends a shiver through me.